This bill mandates the display of the Ten Commandments in every classroom in public, elementary, secondary, and post-education schools.
Opponents are questioning if it's even constitutional, saying that lawsuits probably will be coming soon.
Hi friends! Today we're going to talk about something super important, what it means to be transgender.
Right-wingers spark controversy with a controversial religious form in a red state, a $42 billion fail from the Biden administration gets exposed, a major pilots union goes woke, and a trans TikToker's creepiest video yet. All this and so much more is coming up on today's episode of Brad vs. Everyone, my daily podcast where I take on the craziest ideas from across our politics and across the internet from a center-right, independent perspective. If you're new here, please consider subscribing and sticking around. And if you're a returning viewer, don't forget to hit that like button and do comment with your thoughts as we go along. I do read the comments and I pick a few to respond to in every episode. Now up first, we've got to talk about Louisiana, where the Republican-controlled state legislature and a GOP governor just signed some pretty controversial legislation into law. Here's an update from 9 News.
Today, Louisiana's Republican governor signed a bill into law saying that starting in 2025, all public schools in Louisiana will have to display the Ten Commandments in every classroom. The commandments, they say, will have to be put up in a poster-sized display with an easy-to-read font. This law applying from pre-K all the way through classrooms and state-funded universities. Supporters say their purpose is more than just religious, saying the Ten Commandments have historical significance. Opponents are questioning if it's even constitutional, saying that lawsuits probably will be coming soon.
Here's what the governor, Jeff Landry, had to say for himself when signing the bill, which, interestingly, he chose to do on site at a private Catholic school.
This bill mandates the display of the Ten Commandments in every classroom in public, elementary, secondary, and post-education schools in the state of Louisiana. Because if you want to respect the rule of law, you got to start from the original lawgiver, which was Moses.
This is already sparking outrage and concern from First Amendment advocates like the ACLU. Here's WFAA's coverage of their pending lawsuit.
The ACLU says it is suing the state of Louisiana over its new law requiring the Ten Commandments be displayed in public schools. The civil liberties group citing a 1980 Supreme Court decision ruling that a similar law in Kentucky violated the Constitution and separation of church and state. If nothing changes, that new law would go into effect in 2025.
The ACLU explained their reasoning in a statement. The displays mandated by this law will result in unconstitutional religious coercion of students who are legally required to attend school and thus are a captive audience for school-sponsored religious messages. They will also send a chilling message to students and families who do not follow the state's preferred vision of the Ten Commandments that they do not belong and are not welcome in our public schools. It probably won't surprise you guys to learn that I'm with the ACLU on this one, but so are many Christian conservatives, like the radio host Eric Erickson. He tweeted, "I graduated from a Louisiana public school where most classrooms had the Ten Commandments on the wall. The posters had been donated by a church. But when the third grade reading level is only 49%, I don't see why the state wants to spend money on lawyers for a probably unconstitutional law making the Ten Commandments mandatory just to virtue signal a side in a culture war. Actually use conservative reforms to fix the schools instead of putting up posters half the third grade cannot even read." Damn, Eric, tell us how you really feel. So my first issue with this is that it directly goes against established Supreme Court First Amendment precedent. In a 1980 case called Stone v. Graham, the Supreme Court very clearly ruled that state governments can't do this. They can't force schools to display the Ten Commandments. They ruled that that's a violation of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, which prohibits the establishment of an official state religion. And I think for people who care about the Constitution and the Bill of Rights, it's pretty clear that this is a no-go. They're not incorporating learning about the Ten Commandments alongside other religious tenets and documents and faith displays as part of a religion class or something. That would be fine. But they're singling out one type of religious symbolism and beliefs and promoting that through official school policy to the exclusion of others. If that doesn't violate the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment, I don't know what would. And what bothers me about this is that so many on the right in recent years have often correctly decried public schools for attempting to push woke indoctrination, left-wing ideology and messaging on kids who are a captive audience. But the correct answer to this is to have viewpoint neutrality and institutional neutrality in public institutions. It's not to support indoctrination, but just force our kind of indoctrination, or the right-wing kind. That makes you a total hypocrite, and opening that Pandora's box is a big mistake for conservatives and Republicans, because spoiler alert, they're vastly outnumbered in the public school system. So undermining the principles that maintain neutrality in public systems in hopes of owning the libs in a culture war is not just unprincipled, but radically short-sighted and counterproductive. That's just my take on it. You can let me know what you think in the comments below, but I'm not a fan of this, and I do think it will be struck down by the courts. Up next, the Biden administration has a ton of egg on its face right now because a $42 billion fail from the administration just got exposed. Over 3 years ago, the Biden administration and his allies in Congress passed a more than $42 billion federal program meant to distribute access to high-speed internet across the country. But now we know that 3 years later, they've accomplished basically nothing and are just caught up in red tape. As Susan Federico of the Washington Times reports, residents in rural America are eager to access high-speed internet under a $42.5 billion federal modernization program, but not a single home or business has been connected to new broadband networks nearly 3 years after Biden signed the funding into law, and no project will break ground until sometime next year. Wow. The government is always inefficient and incompetent, but this is a new level of dysfunction. Why so inefficient this time? Well, the Washington Times explains. Lawmakers and internet companies blame the slow rollout on burdensome requirements for obtaining the funds, including climate change mandates, preferences for hiring union workers, and the requirement that eligible companies prioritize the employment of, quote, justice-impacted people with criminal records to install broadband equipment. That's right. They're not doing the thing to help the people with the tax money that they're supposed to, because they added all these unnecessary woke hoops they have to jump through, like employing criminals. You honestly, this sounds like it should be a Babylon Bee headline. You can't make this shit up. But while this example might sound particularly absurd, it's unfortunately just kind of par for the course when it comes to how the government actually executes taxpayer spending and massive social programs. And for me, it's just another reminder that if we are waiting on the government to solve our problems, we're going to be waiting a long time. Up next, one of the biggest pilots unions is now embracing woke speech policing and calling into question their own credibility. Fox News reports that a pilot union is suggesting phasing out masculine terms like cockpit and father, saying they are offensive to diversity and inclusive culture. Oh boy. Here we go again, y'all. The world's largest airline pilot union suggested airmen and airwomen stop using terms purportedly offensive to women and LGBTQ individuals, calling out terms like cockpit as non-inclusive. Fox News' Hannah Grossman reports. We're just getting into the details here, but God, this is so infantilizing, as if women or LGBT people are so fragile that the phrase cockpit is somehow harmful to them. Give me a break. Anyway, Airline Pilots Association International represents over 70,000 pilots worldwide and states that it collaborates with a United Nations agency on its policies. According to a DEI language guide released in 2021, the ALPA lists numerous terms and phrases to avoid, especially masculine generalizations, that it deemed to be non-inclusive. Yeah, because when I have a pilot flying the plane and we hit bumpy air, what I'm really worried about is not the competence of the pilot, but whether they're using inclusive language in the cockpit, or I should say front of plane space. Inclusive language in communications is essential to our union's solidarity and collective strength, and is an important factor in maintaining flight safety, the guide states. The purpose of this language guide is to offer examples of terms and phrases that promote inclusion and equity. Excuse me, how does inclusive language, like not saying cockpit, have anything to do with airplane safety? ALPA, for example, suggested replacing the word cockpit with flight deck. The purportedly offensive term has been and may be used in a derogatory way to exclude women in the piloting profession, the guide states. Many women have heard a variation of, "It is called a cockpit for a reason," by a male pilot, suggesting that women do not belong in the piloting profession, the guide said. Okay, but the problem there is the sexist statement using the phrase to suggest that women shouldn't be pilots, which I totally disagree with and I think is wrong. It's not the cockpit name itself, which, by the way, guys, doesn't actually have anything to do with gender. As the Wall Street Journal columnist and linguist Ben Zimmer wrote, the term cockpit actually originated from cockfighting in 16th century England. But the woke speech policing from this pilots union actually got more absurd. Similarly, the ALPA's guide called for the words man and men to be avoided. Oh, that's very inclusive and tolerant. It offered suggestions for the word manpower, including people/human power. Who will provide the people/human power to support this event? The guide stated as an example. Well, that really rolls off the tongue there. The guide also suggests avoiding using masculine terms like guys when addressing groups, since the word is not inclusive of women, transgender people, and people with different gender identities. Okay, this is so dumb. Guys referring to a group of people is gender inclusive. It refers to men and women, and it is again so condescending to suggest that any woman pilot who's probably a badass is so fragile that being referred to in a group as guys is going to have any effect on her. You're actually the sexist one if you think that she's petite and fragile and needs to be sheltered from minor verbal tics that aren't even offensive to any sane person. But this is what passes for diversity and inclusion these days. Give me a break. The ALPA also advised against using the terms mother or father because that phrasing could alienate different family structures, such as grandparents as caregivers, same-sex parents, and others. Similarly, husband and wife and boyfriend and girlfriend should be avoided since the phrases could ignore same-sex couples. This is so stupid. As a gay person with a boyfriend, I am not harmed or hurt by other people referring to their girlfriends. What are you talking about? And you're only going to sabotage support for acceptance when you start demanding that other people change the way they view themselves and describe themselves, rather than just ask also for your own space to be tolerated and accepted. And again, I've never met a gay person so mentally or emotionally fragile that other people talking about mothers and fathers or boyfriend and girlfriend is somehow harmful to them. Of course, the ALPA defended itself in a statement to Fox News after the publication of this story. Flying is the safest mode of transportation in the world, thanks in large part to airline pilots, professionals that are all held to the highest training and qualification standards. There are real threats to aviation safety, like efforts to replace pilots with automation or lower training and experience standards, but opening the doors of opportunity to ensure that we have a robust supply of qualified aviators isn't one of them. Okay, flying is incredibly safe, and I do agree that the DEI nonsense hasn't changed that if you look at the statistics. But it is safe in spite of this woke nonsense, not because of it. The word cockpit doesn't endanger airplane safety, nor does using the words mother or father or boyfriend or girlfriend. But what could actually endanger it over time is focusing on stupid shit instead of being good at your job. You can open the door to make sure that all people from all walks of life have a fair and equal shot at becoming a pilot if they're suited for it, without this level of inane and cringeworthy speech policing. To be clear, I totally disagree with some loud right-wing voices who have basically said they no longer even trust a woman pilot or a black pilot. But what I will say is that one of the pilots involved in drafting this language guide, yeah, I don't want to be flying in their plane. I will say that much, because I'm not sure they're really a serious person. That's just my take. Let me know what you think in the comments about this whole silliness. And now, it's time for Brad vs. TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas from across the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Make sure you're subscribed if you haven't yet. Don't forget to hit that like button to reward my suffering as I lose brain cells for your enjoyment. And now, let's take a look at this Truly crazy video from a popular transgender TikToker who dressed up like Miss Rachel, a famous YouTuber who makes content for toddlers and infants, to deliver this diatribe on teaching kids about transgender identity. Here we go, and jump scare warning.
Hi friends! Today we're going to talk about something super important, what it means to be transgender. It's a big word, but I promise that it's easy to understand. Ready to learn? The first thing I want you to do is close your eyes. Now think, do you feel like a boy, a girl, or a little bit of both? Do you have your answer? Great. Now I want you to imagine that everyone keeps telling you that you're something else, even though in your heart you know who you are. Wouldn't that make you sad inside? People who feel like this are transgender. And if you're not transgender, it's super easy to be friends with someone who is. Let's take our imaginary friend Theo, for example. One day you notice that Theo starts wearing girl clothes instead of boy clothes, and then they tell you that they want to be called Luna instead of Theo. This is so exciting for our friend Luna because they finally get to be their true self. And if you accidentally call Luna by their old name, make sure to say a big sorry and that you'll do better next time. As you can see, transgender people are just like you and me. They're our friends.
Everything about this is so off-putting. I mean, I genuinely can't imagine a better way to take LGBT acceptance and simply light it on fire. Send it back to the frickin' Stone Age than this insane, creepy content. We spent so long convincing people we're not coming for your kids because it's not true, right? Gay people are not more likely to harm children than anyone else. And now we have T activists, who aren't even representative of most trans people, to be clear, just the extreme activists, actively trying to confuse and indoctrinate children, and now literal toddlers and infants. There is absolutely no business or need to be talking about any of this with young children. Toddlers don't even know what boy or girl really mean, and so to try to explain to them these rare phenomenons like transgender identity that are complex, you're just confusing kids. And what you're saying to them doesn't even make sense. Feel like a boy, or feel like a girl, or feel like a little bit of both. Well, that last one is not a thing, and the first one can't really be explained without using crude sex stereotypes that we shouldn't be reinforcing for kids. There's just no need for this. If you have the rare experience where a kid does experience gender dysphoria from a very young age, that will emerge organically. And parents and teachers at the local level, they can figure out how to handle that with compassion, dignity, and respect for everyone involved. But we don't need to do this. We don't need to go and start propagandizing 2-year-olds with gender ideology. That only serves to confuse these poor children and light acceptance for our community on fire. This individual in particular really bothers me, Lily Tino, because Lily is getting a lot of views, a lot of hate views on this content and monetizing it, I'm sure, and making thousands of dollars per video. But this is obvious rage bait, simply perfectly designed in a lab to give genuine transphobes or genuine homophobes something to use to falsely portray all LGBT people as if we're all creepy indoctrinators who want to confuse children when we're not. And so you're literally sabotaging acceptance of the community you say you care about, gifting the perfect propaganda to the people who genuinely hate us, and just cashing out on the rage bait. All while pushing something objectively inappropriate, deeply inappropriate, onto literal toddlers and infants. Other than that, though, great job. You're doing amazing, sweetie. I don't know how this person sleeps at night. That's all I'll say. Let me know in the comments what you think of this video and of this creator more broadly. And now, before we wrap up today's show, I'll read a few of your comments that y'all left on yesterday's episode. One person writes, I live in the UK and the only people who support Just Stop Oil activists are other Just Stop Oil activists. The rest of us think they are stupid and annoying, that's the polite description, and wish they would just stop. Yes. And in fact, the people I know who hate them the most are my friends who are actual environmentalists, because they're so counterproductive and they sabotage the movement and they're just attention whores, frankly. Another person says, is it really that hard to find an oil refinery and protest outside of it? Seriously? Yeah, look, I wouldn't agree with their protests still, and I don't support their agenda, but at least that would make a little bit of sense. Another person writes, Brad saying Stonehenge completely seriously every time. Sorry about that, guys. I did mispronounce it. It's Stonehenge. I was saying Stonehenge. Sorry. Oops. Another person writes, Niamh is an Irish name pronounced Neve or Niev. The way you said it made me LOL. What did I say? Niam? Oops. Another person writes, why is unhoused better than homeless? It's like trying to block a fact. I don't know. It's just two ways of saying the same thing. I mean, this is what bothers me about the woke stuff, is they're so obsessed with language when rather than actually helping the people, just change the name of it. Well, oh no, that's not a disabled person. That's a differently abled person or a person with a disability. Okay, who cares? It all means the same thing. We're just do something to help them, or shut up. Another person says, I like how you are crack inclusive, as long as it isn't too much crack. To be clear, I don't support any level of crack usage, personally, but I'm just telling people some of them have clearly had too much. All right, everybody, that's it for today's episode. Thanks so much for joining in. Don't forget to hit that like button and reward me for my suffering. Comment with your thoughts. I do read the comments, and don't forget to subscribe if you haven't yet. And with that, we'll talk again tomorrow.